The year is 1989. The air smells like coal smoke and desperation. You're standing in a bread line in Warsaw. You have a pocket full of cash, and it's worthless. Inflation is running at 600% a year. Your monthly salary buys less than a pair of Levi's on the black market. Western economists look at Poland and see a corpse. They give it maybe 10 years before it crawls back to Moscow or collapses into chaos. Now snap forward to today. Poland has the lowest unemployment in the European Union. It was the only country in Europe, the only one, that didn't fall into recession during 2008. While Germany is shutting down factories and France is on fire, Poland is building, hiring, and quietly becoming the manufacturing backbone of Europe. The average Pole is now wealthier than the average Portuguese. Let that satisfying little fact sink in. This isn't luck, this isn't charity. This is one of the most audacious economic heists in modern history. And almost nobody is talking about it. Today, we're dissecting exactly how a country that was economically dead 35 years ago learned to beat the West at its own game. We're looking at 5 pillars: the chainsaw surgery, the Green Island cheat code, the education arbitrage, the diversification fortress, and the final boss that could end it all. Let's go. To understand why Poland succeeded where everyone else failed, you have to understand what they did on January 1st, 1990. And I mean exactly what they did, because it was absolutely insane. Most economists at the time believed you had to transition slowly from communism to capitalism, carefully, gently, like diffusing a bomb. Poland looked at that conventional wisdom and said, "Nah, we're doing surgery with a chainsaw." Meet Balcerowicz. Glasses. Receding hairline. 0 patience for half measures. When the first non-communist government took power, they handed him the keys to the economy and basically said, "Fix this mess or we all die." What did he do? He freed all prices. Overnight. One day the government decided what bread cost, the next day the market did. Prices immediately tripled, but suddenly there was actually bread on the shelves. He made the currency convertible. For 45 years the Polish zloty had been monopoly money. Now you could actually exchange it for dollars. He slashed subsidies to zombie factories that had been kept alive by government life support since Stalin. Suddenly they had to make things people actually wanted to buy or die. And he opened the borders. Poland went from a closed economy to one of the most open in Europe in weeks, not years. Weeks. The pain was immediate and brutal. Inflation spiked to 250% in January alone. Unemployment, which had officially been 0 under communism because everyone had a fake job, shot up to 16%. Factories closed, people suffered. Balcerowicz's own coalition nearly collapsed. Western critics screamed he was a madman. Some Poles wanted him hanged. But here's what everyone missed. The pain was front-loaded. By ripping off the Band-Aid all at once, Poland avoided the trap that caught Russia and Ukraine, the endless, bleeding, half-reform purgatory where nothing ever heals because nobody ever commits. Let me show you what I mean. Russia tried gradual reform. They privatized slowly. They kept subsidies flowing. They let the old communist bosses stay in charge and steal everything. The result? A lost decade. GDP collapsed by 40%. The middle class evaporated. Oligarchs bought the country for pennies. Poland took the hit up front. By 1992, 2 years later, growth returned. By 1995, Poland was the first post-communist country to exceed its 1989 GDP. Russia didn't hit that milestone until 2007. The Balcerowicz Plan was economic chemotherapy. It nearly killed the patient, but the patient lived. And that patient was about to get very, very strong. But the chainsaw surgery was just the setup. The real magic trick came in 2008 when Poland pulled off something that shouldn't have been possible. Okay, pop quiz. How many European Union countries avoided recession during the 2008 global financial crisis? Take a guess. The answer is 1. Exactly 1. Poland. While the world was burning, while Lehman Brothers collapsed, while Iceland went bankrupt, while Greece started its death spiral, while Germany shrank by 5%. Poland just kept growing. They called it Zielona Wyspa, the Green Island, one green spot on a map of economic devastation. How? How is that even possible? 3 reasons, and they're all connected. Reason 1, they never joined the euro, and this sounds small, it's not. It's everything. When Poland joined the EU in 2004, everyone assumed they'd adopt the euro eventually. Brussels pushed for it. The IMF pushed for it. It seemed inevitable. Poland said, no thanks, we'll keep the zloty. This looked stubborn at the time, maybe even backward. But it turned out to be genius. Here's why. When you have your own currency, you have a shock absorber. When the 2008 crisis hit, the zloty dropped about 30% against the euro. Sounds bad, right? It was actually a gift. That devaluation made Polish exports suddenly 30% cheaper. German companies that were desperately cutting costs looked at Polish suppliers and thought, wait, why am I paying twice as much for the same part made in Stuttgart? Polish factories stayed full while German factories went quiet. Meanwhile, countries trapped in the euro, Greece, Spain, Portugal, Ireland, couldn't devalue. They had to do internal devaluation instead. That's economist speak for fire everyone and cut wages until you're competitive again. Poland's unemployment barely budged. Greece's hit 27%. The zloty wasn't a weakness, it was a weapon. Reason 2, Polish banks were boring. I mean this as the highest compliment. In the mid-2000s, while American and European banks were creating exotic financial instruments and leveraging themselves to the eyeballs, Polish banks were doing something radical. They were lending money to people who could pay it back and keeping that debt on their own books. Crazy, right? Polish regulators had lived through the chaos of the 1990s. They were paranoid. They required higher capital reserves. They limited foreign currency mortgages. They were basically the hall monitors of European banking. When the music stopped in 2008, Polish banks weren't holding bags of toxic assets. They were holding actual loans to actual businesses that were actually paying them back. Reason 3, domestic demand. Poland had just joined the EU 4 years earlier. The economy was still in catch-up mode. People were buying their first cars, their first washing machines, their first apartments. There was so much pent-up demand that even a global crisis couldn't stop it. The West was over-leveraged and exhausted. Poland was just getting started. Now critics love to point out that Poland received massive EU funding. And that's true. Since 2004, Poland has received roughly 200 billion euros in structural funds, more than any other country. But here's the thing. Lots of countries got EU money. Greece got money. Southern Italy has been getting money for 50 years. They're still broke. The question isn't whether you get the money. The question is what you do with it. Greece used EU funds as a political slush fund, public sector wages, early retirements, projects that never finished. The money was consumed, not invested. Poland built 4,000 kilometers of highways. They built logistics hubs. They built the physical infrastructure that turned Poland into the crossroads of European supply chains. Greece got EU money and bought a lifestyle. Poland got EU money and bought a future. And speaking of buying futures, there's a reason all those logistics hubs needed workers. Poland had a secret weapon that no amount of money could buy. When Western companies first showed up in Poland in the 1990s, the pitch was simple. Cheap labor. Polish workers earned a fraction of German wages. You could hire 3 Polish engineers for the price of 1 German. But here's what made Poland different from every other cheap labor market on the planet. The labor wasn't just cheap, it was good. Meet Tomek. He's a 28-year-old software engineer in Krakow. He graduated from AGH University of Science and Technology, one of the best engineering schools in Central Europe. He speaks fluent English, decent German, and he's been coding since he was 14. In Vietnam or the Philippines, other cheap labor markets, companies get workers who need months of training before they're useful. In Poland, they get Tomek, productive on day 1, writing code that ships. This is the education arbitrage. Communism was a disaster in almost every way. But it did one thing right: education. By 1989, Poland had a 99% literacy rate and a deep bench of engineers, scientists, and technicians. When capitalism arrived, that human capital was ready to deploy immediately, but the post-communist governments didn't coast on the Soviet legacy. They expanded it. Today, Poland has over 400 universities. Nearly 45% of young Poles have a university degree, higher than Germany, higher than France, higher than the UK. And they're not getting useless degrees. Poland produces more STEM graduates per capita than almost anywhere in Europe. Engineers, programmers, mathematicians, the exact skills that modern industry pays a premium for. Now here's where it gets interesting. For years, this created an arbitrage opportunity. Western companies could hire elite Polish talent for a quarter of Western wages. The Poles got jobs that were great by local standards. The companies got genius-level workers at discount prices. Everyone won. But arbitrage opportunities don't last forever. Polish wages have roughly tripled since EU accession. A senior developer in Warsaw now costs real money. Not German money, but not peanuts either. So what happened? Did the companies leave for cheaper markets? No, they doubled down. Why? Because Poland had built something even more valuable than cheap labor. It had built ecosystems. Take business services. In 2004, that sector barely existed in Poland. Today, over 400,000 Poles work in shared services centers, doing accounting, IT support, legal work, and customer service for Goldman Sachs, Google, HSBC, you name it. Krakow alone has more business services employees than most entire countries. Once you have 400,000 skilled workers in one sector, with all the training infrastructure, the management expertise, the institutional knowledge, companies can't just pack up and move to Vietnam. The switching costs are enormous. The ecosystem has its own gravity. But cheap labor was only half the equation. Poland also figured out something else, something that saved them when the world started falling apart. Quick check-in. Did you live through the 2008 crash? Did you watch your country's economy implode while Poland just kept humming along? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your story. And if you're learning something from this breakdown of how one country figured out the cheat codes everyone else missed, hit subscribe. We cover the economics that actually matters, not the stuff that puts you to sleep. Okay, we've talked about what Poland did right. Now let's talk about the fortress they built to protect it. Here's a dirty secret about most economic miracles. They're usually built on one thing: Ireland, pharma and tech tax arbitrage. Singapore, being a port, Germany, cars and machines. When that one thing struggles, the whole country struggles. Poland looked at that model and said, "That's stupid, we're not doing that." What does Poland make? The honest answer is everything. Let me give you a tour. Automotive. Poland is the second largest bus manufacturer in Europe. A company called Solaris, Polish-founded, Polish-run, builds electric buses that run in Berlin, Paris, and Milan. The irony of Germans riding Polish buses never gets old. Furniture. Poland is the second largest furniture exporter in the world, behind only China. That IKEA bookshelf in your apartment, probably made in Poland. Food. Largest poultry exporter in Europe, one of the biggest apple exporters on the planet. Gaming. CD Projekt, the company behind The Witcher, and Cyberpunk 2077 is Polish. Started by two guys selling pirated games in Warsaw's flea markets in the 90s, now worth billions. Beat the Japanese and Americans at their own game. Aerospace, components for Airbus and Boeing. Pratt and Whitney has engine manufacturing there. Batteries, LG and Samsung both have massive EV battery plants in Poland. This diversification is a fortress. When one sector gets hit, the others keep the economy standing. When COVID crushed automotive demand, Polish furniture exports boomed because everyone was renovating their home offices. When energy prices spiked and German chemical plants shut down, Polish food processing kept running because it's not as energy intensive. Compare this to Italy. We covered Italy in another video. Go watch it if you haven't. Italy's manufacturing is concentrated in tiny niches, luxury goods, specific machine tools, family firms with 10 employees that haven't changed since 1970. When China started competing, they couldn't adapt. They were too small, too specialized, too fragile. Poland industrialized late enough to learn from Italy's mistakes. They built scale, they built breadth, they built redundancy. But there's another layer to this fortress: trading partners. Germany is Poland's largest trading partner, about 28% of exports. Sounds like dangerous dependency, right? Except Poland has been systematically reducing that number. Trade with the US, UK, Czechia, and France has all grown faster than trade with Germany. And when Russia invaded Ukraine, Poland pivoted faster than any country in Europe. They cut Russian energy imports to near zero within months, something Germany is still struggling with years later. How did Poland move so fast? Because they never trusted the Russians in the first place. There's no naivety in Warsaw, no Wandel durch Handel, change through trade. Fantasies like in Berlin, centuries of invasions, occupations, and betrayals made sure of that. Now, this is the paranoia dividend. When you've been conquered by both Germany and Russia within living memory, you don't build your economy around depending on either of them. Poland's diversification isn't just economic strategy, it's survival instinct encoded into national policy. But here's the thing about fortresses: they're great at keeping enemies out, but they can't solve every problem. And Poland has a problem. A big one. A demographic time bomb that could blow up everything we've just talked about. Poland is dying. I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean it literally. The population is shrinking. Poland has one of the lowest fertility rates in Europe. At 1.3 children per woman, they're way below the 2.1 needed just to maintain the current population. The causes are the same as everywhere in the developed world. Housing is expensive, careers come first. The traditional family model has eroded, but Poland has two additional problems that make this even worse. Problem one, the brain drain. For decades after EU accession, millions of young Poles packed their bags and moved west, to London, to Dublin, to Berlin, chasing better wages. There are jokes that Polish is the second language of the UK. Some estimates say 2 million Poles left after 2004, the young, the ambitious, the fertile. Problem two, no immigration safety valve. Unlike Germany, which opened the doors to millions of refugees and migrants, Poland said no. The Conservative government made anti-immigration policy a centerpiece of their platform. It was popular domestically, but it means Poland can't just import workers to fill the gap. So how does Poland avoid the demographic death spiral? Honestly, they might not. This is the existential gamble at the heart of the entire miracle. But there are reasons for cautious optimism. Reason one, Ukrainians. When Russia invaded Ukraine, millions of refugees fled west. Where did the largest number go? Poland. There are now over 1 million Ukrainians living and working in Poland. They speak a similar language, they integrate quickly. Many are young and educated. This wasn't charity, it was strategy. The Polish government fast-tracked work permits. They recognized Ukrainian professional qualifications. They made it easy for Ukrainians to become productive members of the economy. The war in Ukraine is a tragedy. But for Polish demographics, it was an accidental bailout. Reason two, the reverse brain drain. Something unexpected started happening after Brexit made life harder for Poles in the UK. And as Polish wages rose, Poles started coming home. Net migration has reversed. More Poles are now returning from abroad than leaving. They're bringing skills, savings, Western work experience, and international networks, and they're having kids in Poland instead of in Birmingham. Reason three, the safety narrative. This one is newer, and it's dark. Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed the calculation for a lot of people. Suddenly Poland, a NATO member, an EU member, bristling with American military bases, looks like one of the safest places in Eastern Europe. Young Ukrainians who might have gone to Germany are staying in Poland. Polish expats who are living in less stable places are coming back. Safety has become an economic asset. Reason four, automation. This is the big bet. Poland is investing heavily in robotics, trying to get more output from fewer workers. If they can increase productivity fast enough, they might maintain GDP growth even with a shrinking population. It's a race against time. The demographic crunch will hit hard in the 2030s and 2040s. Poland has maybe 10 to 15 years to prepare. Unlike Italy or Japan, which wasted their preparation window, Poland seems to be taking it seriously. Will it work? Ask me in 2040. But there's one more trap waiting, one that has killed every emerging market miracle in history. Here's a pattern that economists have seen over and over again. A poor country gets its act together. It grows rapidly for 20, 30 years. It catches up to middle-income status and then it stops. Mexico, Brazil, Turkey, Thailand, Malaysia, Argentina. All of them hit a ceiling somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000 GDP per capita, and they couldn't break through. This is the middle-income trap. It's where economic miracles go to die. The playbook that gets you from poor to middle income doesn't work for getting from middle income to rich. You can't just keep competing on cheap labor because you're not cheap anymore. You have to start competing on innovation, productivity, and high-value added industries. Poland is now firmly in the middle-income zone. The easy gains are over. Can they make the jump? The bulls say yes. Poland has strong institutions, rule of law, good education, a diversified industrial base, a paranoid work ethic forged by centuries of adversity. They're not Brazil, they're not Turkey. They have advantages those countries never had. The bears say every country thinks they're different, until they're not. The honest answer? Nobody knows. Poland is the experiment. We're watching it in real time. But if any country can beat the trap, Poland has a shot. So let's bring it back to where we started. 1989, breadlines, worthless currency, a country written off by everyone who mattered. 2026, the only EU economy that never stopped growing, wealthier than Portugal, building the factories that Germany can't afford to run anymore. How did they do it? They didn't try to be clever. They took the pain up front. They built things instead of consuming things. They diversified instead of specializing. They stayed paranoid instead of getting comfortable. And they had something that can't be taught or bought. Przekora, stubborn defiance. The Polish habit of doing something specifically because everyone said it couldn't be done. That's what turned breadlines into business hubs. That's what turned a dying patient into the Green Island. Can they keep it going? Can they beat the middle-income trap, survive the demographic crisis, and become a genuine European power? I don't know, but I've learned not to bet against Przekora. Thanks for watching. If you want to see what happens when a country does the opposite of everything Poland did right, check out our video on Italy. It's the anti-miracle, the cautionary tale. Subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you in the next one.